Welcome everyone to the latest episode of a series I like to call History Speaks. My guest this week is a seasoned traveller and seen at many history festivals around the country, an historian and political scientist who specialises in totalitarian regimes. He has penned 2 books, The Crystallisation of Totalitarianism and Dictators, and his writing has appeared in popular history magazines such as All About History and History of War. In 2024, Jackson was named in BBC History Extra's 30 Under 30 Historians, and he also has a very successful podcast. But today, our main topic of conversation is festival related, and to tell us all about one of the biggest events coming up at the end of January in 2025 is my guest today, Jackson van Uden. Hi Jackson, how are you?
Hi John, how you doing, mate? Doing very well.
I'm really good. I'm freezing cold because we've picked probably the worst day of the new year so far to do this, but there you go. Now,
yeah, that is what it is.
It is what it is. Now, before we get started, here's one for you. Now, knowing you love the odd dictator, if you had a chance to speak with one, without, of course, fear of retribution, who would it be, and what burning question do you think you'd ask them?
Oh, that's a nice one. I think I would go for Stalin. Most of my writing for most of my career and academic life has been centered around Stalin. So I would ask him more details about his persecution and the Great Terror. You know, was he having a clear target in mind? Was he having a clear procedure in mind? Or was it just something that happened? The Great Terror is something that really, really interests me. So that political purges that happened across the 1930s. So I'd like to get some more information on that from the man himself.
It is a very interesting character. Yeah, I mean, good luck with that one, speaking with him, because I'm sure you'd be able to find some relevant information by speaking to him. But obviously that's never going to happen. So
no, unfortunately not.
That's not going to happen. Anyway, let's move on. So, as always, with a guest on the show, I like to ask them this particular question. So, how did you first become interested in history, and what was your background?
Yeah, so I've always really been interested in history. So, whenever me and my brother used to be taken to historical sites by my parents, they wouldn't let us buy a toy. Instead, they'd say, get a book. And one of my first books I remember getting at the Tower of London was the Horrible Histories England copy, which I absolutely love. I completely adore that book. It's still on my shelf. And I'd always loved history from that point. I used to have competitions with my best friend, seeing how many kings and queens we can name. It was only this last year that I found out she was cheating because she had a ruler that had all the kings and queens on. So that was how I kind of got interested in history. But I did have, and I think it's important to acknowledge, I've kind of fallen out of love of history sometimes, particularly through the way the curriculum is based here in the UK. A lot of it is based on memory. And I have an absolute shocking memory, and I can never remember dates, specific names, locations of battles if they don't have it in the actual battle name. And I fell out of love of history between, year 11, end of year 11 and year 12, when I was 16. And instead, I focused on sports. I did sports GCSE at an AS level. I played rugby quite a lot. I was doing like 20 hours of rugby a week, maybe even more. So my background from about 16 to about 19 was inherently sports-based. Rugby was my life. I worked for rugby kit companies. I ran rugby festivals. I played rugby for, 3 or 4 teams across a year. It was my life. And I did year 12 twice because I broke my collarbone in my first year. I was zonked out on codeine. So when I did year 12 again, I started doing business, fell asleep in a business lesson, did history again. And from that point, with various injuries, broken collarbone, ACL, I then went through what every sportsman does, have an identity crisis because you're like, oh, I'm not a rugby player anymore. And I started focusing more on my history. And then kind of went from there. So, those who are familiar with sports content and the way sports content is filmed and produced might see some of those influences in the way that I present history, because that was, everything I watched. I wasn't watching history documentaries. I was watching any sport that was on telly. Tour de France. One year, basically watched all of snooker with my brother. I've watched walking, like all that stuff, because I just couldn't get enough sports. So taking that sports background into my history has been quite fun, actually.
Well, that's interesting. So I think we can end the interview at that point then, if there's no talk about history. Of course, the main reason for our chat today is the upcoming Katharine of Aragon festival, which I know you're heavily involved with and which we can talk about later. But for people who are not aware, how is Katharine of Aragon connected to the city of Peterborough?
Yeah, so, I think, as you're alluding to there, it's quite a mysterious connection, because whenever we think of Katharine of Aragon, we don't think of Peterborough, but actually she's been in Peterborough longer than she's ever been anywhere else. So when Katharine of Aragon died at Kimbolton Castle on the 7th of January 1536, it was eventually decided that she would be buried at Peterborough Abbey, as it was known then, and again on the 29th of January 1536. And ever since then, Peterborough has commemorated and celebrated Catharine's life. So owing to Henry VIII, wanting to give that last final insult to Catherine by burying her as a Princess Dowager of Wales at Peterborough Abbey, Peterborough has been connected to Katharine of Aragon.
So it's quite remarkable that, like you say, she's spent more time in Peterborough than anywhere else. And exploring the connection to Peterborough offers an interesting glimpse into her story. Now, her life and legacy continue to spark deeper questions about her most significant relationships. So knowing that, Catherine, as we know, was married to Henry VIII for 24 years. What do you think went wrong?
I get a bit of grief for this, actually, because I tend to look at Henry, and I can be a little bit more sympathetic to Henry than some Tudor historians are. I think what kind of went wrong is that Henry's feeling the pressures of kingship, and he's feeling the pressure to want an heir. And Catherine, by about 1528, there's contemporary sources that said she'd gone past the time for natural time for a woman, or something like that. So there was a general acknowledgement and recognition that Catherine couldn't provide Henry an heir anymore. And I think that pressure gets to Henry. So he begins trying to find avenues for an heir, particularly after the death of Henry Fitzroy, his illegitimate son, with Elizabeth Blount. And you also have those councillors making Henry aware that he needs an heir. And Henry, being a second son from a usurper, whilst he has Elizabeth of York's legitimacy, he is still aware that the Tudor line is a usurper dynasty, and he is a second son himself. He is intricately aware that the need for an heir for this line. Typically in English history, usurper lines are not safe unless there's been two clean successions. And Henry is the first clean succession. So I think there's various pressures there that lead to that. And I think that's where it begins to go wrong. And Catherine had also been the first female ambassador in the world. And she had been providing information to Henry from Ferdinand, her father, Ferdinand of Aragon. And Ferdinand had tricked Henry through Catherine. So Catherine has had slight fall of grace, a lack of trust from Henry. I think it's accumulation of those facts that she can no longer provide male heir. She's not as trusted as she once was as an advisor. And also Henry's having financial issues. And the church offers a convenient way of doing that. So I think that's where it goes wrong for Catherine and Henry. And Alison Weir has also said that she's quoted contemporary sources as saying that no woman was spared Henry's lust. And I think that also gets the better of him.
Did you think that Henry then was a patient man to wait for so long before he took the action of leaving the Roman Catholic way, if you like, and going in a completely different direction. And I guess the question as well is, was he so desperate at that point for a male heir that was the reason that took him to those extremes?
I think it's. I don't think Henry was a patient man. I don't think Henry was a patient man at all. And it represented an opportunity to fix all the issues that he had, his financial woes, marrying Anne Boleyn and having a son. I think it represented an opportunity to do that. But we must remember, whilst Henry had a break from Rome and enforced changes on the church, he himself still remained a practicing Catholic in his private life. So, he didn't change the way that he personally worshipped. He, still aligned with the views that he had when he published a tract which was incredibly dismissive of Martin Luther and his views. So I think Henry wasn't a patient man, and I think it represented an opportunity for him to kind of fix those issues that he was facing. And unfortunately, if he'd been more patient, their marriage was annulled in 1533. It had been going on for 2.5, maybe 2 years prior to that. If he'd only waited to 1536 when Catherine died of cancer, he could have just done what he wished. But again, that's with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah. I mean, it was an incredible relationship and a story I'm sure that will resonate with many more over the years to come. Now, it also raises the question of how can we honour and celebrate Catherine's remarkable life. So why should we be celebrating the life of Catherine?
So, personally, Catherine was an incredibly inspirational and influential woman. Henry, I believe that Catherine was the only queen that Henry had that he truly loved, because he was with Catherine for longer than the other 5 wives put together. So that enormously long relationship in comparison to Henry's others kind of demonstrates that. Now, Henry was not the nicest to Catherine. What he did to Catherine, I think, is perhaps crueler than just beheading some of his other wives, because he puts her through 2.5 years, even longer, actually, of ritual humiliation. He keeps Anne Boleyn in royal palaces, in apartments not far from Catherine's. He is very public with Anne Boleyn at court when Catherine is there. He spends time with Anne Boleyn and goes on progress with her and leaves Catherine at royal palaces. He spends time with Anne Boleyn as he has Catherine darn his shirt. And when he's going through the King's Great Matter, trying to annul that marriage, he refuses to let Mary and Catherine speak to one another or communicate until they both recognise Anne as the Queen. And it's incredibly cruel treatment. And I think in terms of celebrating Catherine, what we are trying to do is give Catherine the respect that she deserves. She was buried as a Princess Dowager of Wales when she was actually Queen. So part of that giving respect is commemorative services, looking at parts of her life and looking at Catherine as an individual, not just as Henry's Queen. And also, it's important to recognise that, whilst we refer to Henry as Catherine as Henry's first wife, we can also refer to Henry as Catherine's second husband. And it's trying to centre that narrative of that Tudor period and that particular period around Catherine instead of centering it around Henry or pitting his 6 wives against each other, which we really shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. And highlighting the reasons, I guess, behind such a celebration truly shows how impactful her life was, and her legacy as well. And it's also interesting to learn about the journey that brought you to be part of this event. So how did you first get involved with the festival?
Yeah, so I've lived in Peterborough most of my life, since I was about 5. And when I was a child, I went to this festival. I went with school. I took part in some of the things. I've spent so much time at the cathedral. I have a sign. One year I made my mum go to the book signing of Alison Weir to get myself a book when I couldn't go. So this festival has been like a huge part of the life in Peterborough for the last 20 years that I've lived here. And it's been something that I've been aware of and been involved in and gone to for the last 20 years. So last year, I asked the cathedral, can I cover Katharine of Aragon through the podcast and through the social media? I'm from Peterborough. I want to try and help out. And I, had a really good time covering the festival. And afterwards, they invited me to the mop-up meeting, kind of assess what went right, what they could do better in. And from there, my involvement just grew because, I wanted to help out. I wanted to see what we could do. But also, another point of that for me was that nothing historical, like in terms of big festivals and big events, happens that much north of London. Most of the history world is southern and western centric. Gloucester's in the west, Chalk's down southwest, Histfest and all those kind of things are happening in London. So the history world is very southwest centric. And when I was growing up, not a lot of history came to Peterborough. And I wanted to be involved in offering people opportunities and chances to see people who they admire and chances to see history that weren't in Peterborough when I was younger. Because I think that's important. And I'm sick and tired. I've said this in several other interviews and podcasts. I was sick and tired of saying that Peterborough was the worst place in the UK to live. Thankfully, we've gone down to 6th this year on that list. But I was absolutely sick and tired of saying that. Oh, where are you from? Peterborough. Oh, what's Peterborough? It's near Cambridge. What's Peterborough known for? Oh, it's the worst place to live in the UK. I was sick and tired of saying that. And I wanted to do something that helps my hometown because, whilst it's fantastic developing your career and going to all these places and seeing all these people, for me, it's worth nothing if I do nothing to give back. And I work in schools in Peterborough. I'm a part-time teacher at a local school. I see kids who don't have a lot, and I work with kids who don't have these opportunities. So if you can bring them to Peterborough, I feel that I'm doing my part to help my city.
Yeah, and it is surprising when you say that about the history festivals are generally down south, and they are, and yet there's so many fantastic places above the Watford Gap that would be ideal for a weekend or a couple of days, and because there's there is that north-south barrier. It's always been there, we know that, but there are places. I mean, I don't know, Kenilworth Castle, fantastic place to go and have a couple of days weekend. I don't know if English Heritage will run that. I know they have open days and things, but the way you're doing this with Peterborough and with the Katharine legacy, etc., and festival is different. But there are places up north where you could have a really good history festival, and it is surprising that did all go there. It's like you say, it's Chalk or Gloucester or whatever.
Yeah, and that's not to take away from Chalk and Gloucester, because I love going there, and I absolutely love Chalk. I arrange my whole year around going to Chalk. But it's about it's about being accessible. And I pride myself in trying to make history accessible. And in order for history to be more accessible, it's got to also be available further north of London. And hopefully we're doing that with, Katharine of Aragon Festival. Whilst we're only 45 minutes north from London, it's actually quite easy to get here from Birmingham, from Leeds, from York, from London. And I think that's the benefit of Peterborough, is it is incredibly accessible, but also, Peterborough Cathedral is absolutely stunning. I'm not just saying that because I'm from Peterborough and I work with the cathedral. It is a gorgeous cathedral, and more people should see it, because it's like every time this is rather not to be disparaging to other cathedrals. Every time I see another cathedral, I am like, oh, it's not quite Peterborough. So I want other people to experience that as well.
But it's like when you say, I mean, like York, for example, it's a place filled with so much history, and yet there's nothing. There's nothing up there, and yet that would be a fantastic location. And speaking of the locations, Leicester, if we can get Nathan Ormin set up his own little festival at Richard III's place there, then we'll be well aware, won't we? But anyway, let's move on, because...
Well, that's a good point, Nathan, actually. Nathan's going to be speaking at the festival in Peterborough.
He is.
So, yeah, looking forward to seeing Nathan in Peterborough.
We'll see how he gets on. Anyway, I'm sure yourself and your team will be able to make this a great success. And looking ahead, there's so much excitement surrounding this year's event. So what will you be looking forward to the most at this year's festival?
Oh, that's like asking someone to pick their favourite child.
Yeah.
I'm the talks creator. I'm the talks creator as part of this festival. So it would be amiss for me to not talk about the talks program that we've got here. This year at Katharine of Aragon Festival, we're really working on extending that talks program. Last year, it was an online talk given by Owen Emerson. Owen's a fantastic historian. He was talking about Catherine and Anne's Book of Hours, based on some of the work that himself and Kate McCaffrey have been doing at Hever Castle. But this year we look to expand it and to offer some in-person talks. So we got 6 talks at the Cathedral and 1 at the museum. And they're going across the Saturday and Sunday at the festival. So on the Saturday, we have Nathan Amen, Peter Stifel, and Nikki Clark speaking. They'll be speaking about essentially the whole Tudor period, going from Henry VII and Elizabeth of York's marriage to the Catherine's ladies in waiting to the relationship between Mary and Catherine. And then on the Sunday, we have Nicola Tallis and Elizabeth Norton and myself speaking. Nicola will be talking about the Beauforts, pretty sure. Yeah, she's talking about the Beauforts. So I've got so many talks to remember. So she'll be talking about Margaret Beaufort, who's incredibly important to the local area. She was one of the benefactors of the new building at the back of the cathedral. She lived at Collie Weston, just 20 minutes up the road. Elizabeth Norton will be talking about Catherine of Aragon, Princess Mary, and the reigning queens of Spain, talking about how they are related, the idea of queen making. And then I'll be talking about Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, but looking at his tyranny through Catherine's eyes, which I'm particularly excited to be doing. So I think the talks program is something that I'm most looking forward to, because I've curated this one at the Cathedral. Charlotte Bolland will be talking about the Portrait Gallery exhibition on Monday night at the museum. But then the other thing I think I'm super looking forward to, because I am a former rugby player, I go to gym quite a bit. I love food. I love so much food.
We'll talk about that one. I mean, it just sounds like there's so much on offer anyway, and there's going to be something for everyone to enjoy over the week. One aspect that always draws a lot of interest is the hands-on experiences that are available for attendees. What sort of Tudor workshops will be available for people to see and, of course, participate?
Oh, God, yeah. So we've got so many. Something that was really important to myself and the education team at the Cathedral and museum is getting children involved, and parents can take part as well. So we've got embroidery workshops, papercraft workshops. We've got at home and at court with the Tudors as well. So we've got so many different ways for people to get hands-on involved in learning about Tudor history, and the things that were important to Catherine, particularly that embroidery, because she was famed for her use of blackwork stitching. So getting people involved and interested in history physically is also a very good way of getting the next generation of historians going. So it's something that I'm super excited to see. I'm not very good at stitching, so I shan't be having a go. But last year I watched them and they were doing something for the Peterborough Cathedral has a famous nave ceiling. So something like that, which will be very cool.
I don't think you'll need to be donning any socks in the near future.
No.
I think the days of stitching are pretty much gone now. With but you just go out and buy a new pair, don't you, if you need socks? And
Unfortunately, so.
So it's just the way it is. But I do think the beauty of any hands-on experiences offers a unique way to connect with history. And of course, going back to food, no Tudor experience would be complete now without exploring the culinary traditions of the time. So, can you tell us about this Tudor banquet?
Oh, so this Tudor banquet is just it's something I'm so excited. We've spent months going, and unfortunately I forgot the menu because I've been wanting to surprise myself with what was coming in front of me. So it's a I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to eat in the cathedral. So it will be in the cathedral in the evening. I think it's starting from about 7:30. And there'll be a full Tudor meal, Tudor-inspired foods, but also Regal Rose, who are our historical reenactors, will be there at the meal. So Henry VIII will be heading up the meal. He'll be leading, when we can start eating, possibly having a go at people that start eating before him. So it's going to be a really, really good event. And people are even being encouraged to dress up for this event. Now, dressing up is my line. I won't be dressing up, but I thoroughly encourage people to come dressed up. Tony, one of the people who work in our education team, she has this gorgeous, deep red Tudor dress that she wears to interact with some of the children. I think she'll be wearing it at the banquet, and I think it was 3 kilograms worth of material. This dress, so I really do encourage people to dress up because you get to live up in that Tudor atmosphere, really have fun, really have a go at it as well, because it's going to be a fantastic opportunity to eat like a Tudor in the middle of the cathedral.
I was going to ask, is there a dress code? But I think you've said there is and there isn't.
The advertising copyright says brush off your codpiece. So if you do have...
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. As you say, I mean, the food was so very different back then and to what we see and obviously eat today. But again, it's another experience, and I'm sure many will enjoy that. Now, shifting focus to the present, there's another experience that promises to captivate visitors during the week-long event, and that is, of course, tours of the cathedral, which I'm sure will be very popular during the festival. Now, what can people expect on this guided walk around?
Yeah, so I think something about the cathedral is a lot of us in Peterborough take it for granted. And if people are coming to Peterborough as well, they might not have seen the cathedral. So it gives people an opportunity to learn more about the history of the building and see a more Tudor-centric history of the building as well. So, Peterborough Cathedral has been there since 1200s. I mean, we've had a building on the site for over 1,000 years. So there's a very long storied history in that, and particularly of the Tudor period. We had two abbots, Abbot Kirkton and Abbot Chambers, who later became the bishop, who added extensively to the cathedral. So what this tour does, it takes you around the cathedral and shows you various Tudor elements. Obviously, it will show you Katharine of Aragon and talk to you about the history of there, talk about where the Lady Chapel used to be, because we don't have a Lady Chapel anymore, and talk to you about the history of the new building at the back of the cathedral. So traditionally, cathedrals were built from their eastern end to their western end because the monks used to do their prayers and their religious business in the eastern end. But just beyond the old east end of our cathedral, Abbot Kirkton started building the new building, which allowed the monks to walk all the way around from the north aisle to the south aisle. And it's got some stunning fan vault ceilings in there, but also in the frieze, some of the edgings of the building, between the ceiling and the floor, there's various insignias and emblems. So it will talk to you about the significance of some of these emblems, such as the Beaufort portcullis, but also one of the few depictions in the country of Katharine of Aragon with Arthur. So to be able to learn the history of a building which people from Peterborough either can't see or take for granted, or people from outside the area should learn about when they come to Peterborough. And then, of course, it'll take you to what used to be Mary Queen of Scots' tomb as well. So it's a really, really good tour to learn more about the history of the building but all in a Tudor-centric way. Because of course it's a Tudor week.
And I think the thing about doing a proper guided tour, you discover far more about a building than you would just browsing yourself. Like you said, those small, like the portcullis of the Beauforts, which I did see the video on Instagram that you put out recently, and it's really interesting because things like that you would just tend to miss. I guess it's like a bit like going to Hampton Court and trying to find, an Anne Boleyn, whatever. Everybody knows.
I go to the cathedral, God knows how many times in a month, and the volunteers are so knowledgeable, and so are the clergy as well. Every time I go for a Katharine of Aragon festival meeting, I'll catch up with a member of the clergy. We'll probably go through the cathedral or through the cathedral's grounds together to get to the meeting, and they'll point out little bits that I've missed, or I'll talk to them about some of the history that's come across in my research. I think that's the beauty of having volunteers and people who care about the building so much, because they know so much more about the history. I mean, Tim Alban Jones, our vice dean, he took me through into the old Saxon foundations of the building, and you learn more about the history of the building, and it makes you think about. I've done some research for my talk and some of the other things I've been writing for Katharine of Aragon. It makes you think about it in a completely different way when you're able to be there, touch the history, and walk, as James Holland Murray would say, walk the ground.
And I think the other thing about any cathedral, a question that probably a lot of people ask when they gaze up and they see the height of these ceilings is, how the hell were they built? Because it's just such amazing buildings, aren't they, to go and have a look at? Yeah,
and I've lived in Peterborough for 20 years. I've gone to events at the cathedral, and I used to sit there during some of these events and count how many stones there were on the pillars. But then it was only this year where actually I was appreciating how tall those pillars are and the different heights between the different pillars. Also, that different pillars are different shapes, and to think that the monks spent that time with trained craftsmen to do it is just absolutely incredible.
It is incredible. I mean, the guided walks offer a fantastic way to connect with the history of the cathedral. There's no doubt about that, and it's exciting to see how such a wide variety of experiences are offered to people at this event. Now, with so much happening through the week, as we know, it runs all week, it also collaborates with the City Museum. Now, what sort of things can people expect to see at that venue?
Yeah, so I think something that people don't quite understand about Peterborough is it is a very old city. There used to be a Roman settlement just on the outskirts of what is the modern city called Peterborough. And then there was an Anglo-Saxon settlement called Hempstead, and then that merged into being Peterborough, and Peterborough moved from the eastern end of the cathedral, northeastern end of the cathedral to the western front. So in that case, there's been a lot of history and a lot of development, and part of what the museum is offering is they're also offering Tudor tours of Peterborough. So they have some of their super knowledgeable guides taking you around Peterborough to highlight some of these historic buildings which have survived. They've survived the Georgians, they have survived the Victorians, and they survived Thatcher's New Town initiative, which looked to revive Peterborough. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of our Tudor buildings. So, this tour, I think, is incredibly important in teaching people the heritage of Peterborough and the significance of some of these buildings, which, again, people from Peterborough might take for granted, but also the significance of buildings which people from Peterborough might not quite understand or have appreciated before. So, one building that used to be Ascatalia, which is now a set of flats, it's got Collie Western slate on the roof, which is one of the few examples of buildings which still have that technique and that type of slate as its roof. So you don't tend to appreciate those things when you walk past them every day. So I think that tour is particularly important. The museum itself is a very old building, and it's built on top of an even older building. So it's been used as a family home. One of Peterborough's historic families, the Ormes, it used to be their family home. It became a hospital and then it became a museum. So there's tours of the vaults underneath the museum, which people think have got ghosts in it, because obviously whenever something's a hospital, there's inevitably ghosts that come with it. And then they're also doing at home with the Tudors as well at the museum, which is a way for people to understand what the Tudors actually did at home. Because I think too often when we look at the Tudor period, we tend to think of the big picture items. What was Henry doing? How many people did Mary kill? How awesome Elizabeth I was, but we don't tend to think of the ordinary, everyday people and their tasks. What it was like being a monk during the Reformation, what crime and punishment was like in that time, what medicine was like in that time, and what home activities were. So it provides a different slant to what the cathedral does, but it really complements the whole overall program. And then they also have their own talk, as I mentioned earlier, with Charlotte Bolland on the Monday night, which is, be really incredible.
I think a tour of the city is a fantastic way to bring not just the festival close to people, but also bring the city in as well, into the festival, if that makes sense. And it sends out, a message that history is not just contained in a cathedral; it's contained in a much wider area, and it's not only there to educate, but it entertains as well in bringing history to life. Now that raises an interesting question about the broader impact that these celebrations have on their location and its historical significance. So do you think an event like this really puts Peterborough on the map? And as obviously many may not know the connections with the city and history throughout the Tudor era.
Yeah, so if anyone hasn't picked up the tone of me loving my hometown and really wanting to give back, and I think we're doing that. I think we're getting to there. Peterborough's been overpromised and underdelivered for decades. Certainly for as long as I can remember, we've had projects promised, never turned up. The local football team, last night played Everton. We've been promised a new stadium for 20 years. We've been promised, so much. And I think this program at the Cathedral and the Museum delivers. And I think it gives us something to be proud of. And I think firstly, the most important impact on Peterborough and Peterborians is it gives us something to be proud of. It gets people to see that, you don't have to go elsewhere to see these things and see these speakers. We can enjoy them in Peterborough. We can be proud of what we offer. And we can learn about about our shared heritage in the comfort of our own city. We don't need to go down south. We don't need to go cross west. We can be proud of what we have in Peterborough, and we can celebrate what we've got in Peterborough, which I think is the first thing. Second thing, in terms of your question about putting Peterborough on a map, yes, I think it sends out a signal to the rest of England, rest of the historical community that we're here. We're here to stay, and come and see what we've got to offer. Because we're 45 minutes away from London. We're an hour and a half away from Birmingham. An hour away from York. We've got a stunning cathedral. We've got a great museum. We've got great country park. We've got Roman heritage, Anglo-Saxon heritage. We've got Flagfen down the road, which has got old Iron Age and Stone Age, Bronze Age archaeological evidence that's been kept in peat, so it's great condition. We've got Longthorpe Tower down the road, which is Richard I Chancellor lived there and his son lived there. We've got so much history, and I think it puts us on the map to let people know that we are a historic location. We are here to stay, and we're serious about this. And something that I talk about with the team at the festival is that this is step one. This is step one. We have so much more to offer, and there's so much more to come for us in the future. Because if we're not utilising everything we've got, what are we doing? I do live by, if I'm not going to do it, someone else is going to do it. So, why can't it be Peterborough? And I'm tired of this defeatist attitude that we have of saying, well, we can't do that here. No, we can do it here. And we are going to do it here.
Because I guess you've got the infrastructure and you're already in place. It's just putting it all together and bringing it about, I guess. I mean, highlighting the historical significance of this event really underscores its importance to the city and its rich past, which you've just described. Now, for those interested in the festival, let's talk about more where they can learn more. So where can people find out more about this upcoming event?
Yeah, so I think that's the first question we should ask whenever anyone wants to come to something. So Peterborough Cathedral and Peterborough Museum both have links on the website, on their own websites, to their events and the sister partners events as well. So you can head to the Peterborough Cathedral or Peterborough Museum's websites. But if you can't make it, because I completely appreciate that some people can't, the festival will be covered comprehensively through the History of Jackson platform. But also we'll be welcoming History Rage there, so you can listen to it on their podcast, and If It Ain't Broke podcast. So, there's so many ways to interact with this podcast, this festival even. You can listen to the speakers, you can see what's going on, and then you can come back in 2026. So, so many ways to get involved. There's so many ways to come and see things. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone either in 2025. It is 2025. In a couple of weeks.
It's 2024.
Yeah, I keep forgetting. Or even in 2026, because you're missing out if you're not coming, because Peterborough's a great city, got a great to offer, and Katharine of Aragon Festival, it's a great festival, and you can love it.
It sounds fantastic. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be there for one day anyway. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Yeah. But it's time now to talk about History with Jackson. So where can people find out more about you and information about any other upcoming projects and any other social media sites you'd like to share?
Yeah, so, this whole month for us here at History Jackson is a Tudor takeover. So all our content is Tudor based. Got Tudor podcasts going out, Tudor videos going out, some blogs on the blog post on the website as well. So if you want to interact with them, head to @HistoryOfJackson on Instagram or TikTok, or @HistoryWJackson on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling these days. And then, you can get all the content on the History of Jackson podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the website, historyofjackson.co.uk. So there's plenty of places to come and interact with me. And if you've got any questions about the festival, just DM me, because I'm more than happy to answer them.
And of course, all Jackson's links will be in the description box below when people get to view this. So thank you, Jackson, for joining us today and sharing your insights into the upcoming Katharine of Aragon Festival in Peterborough. It's always a pleasure to hear your passion for history and your dedication to celebrating Katharine's remarkable legacy.
Thank you very much, mate. I appreciate it.
That's not a problem. And just a quick reminder that this year's festival is set to take place at the end of January between the 22nd and 29th, and promises to be an extraordinary event for history enthusiasts and a wonderful opportunity to reflect on the life of one of England's most fascinating queens. Now, I'll be there on Saturday the 25th, so if you can make it along, come and say hello. Although it might put another, 5,000 on your gate there, Jackson. You never know, do you?
Oh, hopefully, I'm looking forward to it.
And as always, to everyone who was tuned in today, thank you so much. We've still got some more incredible guests coming on History Speaks. So if you love history, you'll love History Roadshow. And don't forget to like, which is one of these, I think. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our historical stories. So until next time, keep exploring the past with us, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.